making a case out of the self-evident. But we are at a point where the self-evident is no longer self-evident and needs to be explained and defended. And that's actually, what would you say, that's what's turned me?
Let's listen to Sam Seder talk about this clip of Dave Rubin talking to Jordan Peterson. It is bonkers.
When was the last time he really felt like his career was on an upswing? It was back when he was touring around with Jordan Peterson. Okay. And so go back to Daddy and see if you can get some of that mojo again. And here they are talking about how important conservatism is to liberalism.
I've come to understand something over the last 8 years that I didn't understand in the beginning, as certainly not as well anyways, is that liberal individualism only works when the collective is so well established that you can take it for granted.
Yes.
So as long as the self-evident truths remain self-evident, then you can have something like a liberal individualism.
So it's basically, as long as the conservatives are holding the door from the barbarians, then the liberals can be liberal.
Exactly that.
And that's how a functional society should work, in essence.
Well, in the story of the
Pause it for
Hobbit
1 second. This is fascinating. And before we get into the Hobbit stuff, maybe we need to even go back a little bit earlier to see this, but what he's describing is why libertarianism can exist, first off.
Yeah.
The organization of society, like what are conservatives keeping at bay at the doors? Like what is it that they are keeping at bay? I know the answer to this. It's obviously transgender people. It's gay people, depending on what year it is, or Muslims, or gender fluidity.
DEI.
I mean, I wonder what it is in their mind that conservatives are keeping. Are we not being attacked by, England, or is he saying we're not being attacked by Russia because of conservatives or China? I'm unclear. Go back a little bit and let's listen to this back down, and then we can go into how, of course, this is best described by what's going on with the Hobbit.
Can I just make a point? The collectivists, the people looking after the collective, are the conservatives? I mean, I agree with this. I agree that liberal individualism benefits from, I think, social policy.
Yes, it's completely inverted.
Well, when all this started, and I think it was the same with you, I regarded myself as a classic British liberal, essentially. But I've come to understand something over the last 8 years that I didn't understand in the beginning as certainly not as well.
So he's saying, I used to be basically a libertarian. I think that's when they say classical liberal, that's what, in their mind, it's basically an American libertarian. And now he's trying to justify his move to the right, to the authoritarian right.
Right.
To really, in many respects, the Straussian right, which is we know better, and we're the parents of everybody. And we're setting up the playpen that allows, like the libertarians in the past. Okay, so that's an important context. It's still as bad crap crazy, just it's a more specifically.
I think he kind of knew it when he was theorizing that maybe the government should provide a woman to single men like years ago. But anyway, he's evolving his theories.
Yeah.
Understand in the beginning, as certainly not as well anyways, is that liberal individualism only works when the collective is so well established that you can take it for granted.
Yes.
So as long as the self-evident truths remain self-evident, then you can have something like a liberal individualism.
So it's
I'm
sorry.
But notice how he defines the collective, right? He doesn't define the collective as like a community or of people trying to work together, because it's actually better for society if folks are not segmented, right? He describes it essentially as as shared norms, or as like a shared cultural understanding, which is just like looking backwards nostalgically about, oh, when men wore ties and hats and women wore skirts. But that's not what the collective is. The collective is like supposed to be, at least for leftists, is supposed to be something that like we're working towards the common good for everybody in solidarity.
But the irony is also, I would go further than that, because when he says the self-evident is self-evident, he's talking about God's law. I mean, he may not call it God's law. He may call it just like natural law or whatnot. But the irony is that he is saying the collective creates the obvious,
right?
And I mean, it's both a relativist argument on some level, right? Because presumably a different collective could come up with other things that are self-evident. But almost definitionally, self-evident does not need a collective.
Yes.
Because it's self-evident. So what he's talking about is the collective creates the mores.
Yes.
That are the constraints, right? Think of it as like, this is the fence around in which the dogs can run or the cats can run and not get out of the yard. And he is in that moment basically conceding that that's what the collective does. It allows for, and this is why I argue there is no such thing as a free market, because in fact, yes, society essentially sets up these, the playing field. Now, he's going to pretend it's self-evident, but it's not self-evident. It is a choice that is made by a society at any time. And how much that represents the collective is a function of the level of democracy within that choice, and how the power to develop what is self-evident is distributed. And that sometimes can be money, it sometimes can be religious authority, divine right, whatever it is. And so he just sort of glosses all over this. And he says, it was a real luxury. I didn't realize that I could be a heterodox thinker, part of the IDW. I mean, I think this is some like these two justifying why Sam Harris is not friends with them anymore. I could be a heterodox thinker, but it was only because of the conservatives who were creating morality around and taking care of all of us. But
I just love how the inherent contradiction is that the collective is inherently self-evident and naturally occurring, but also entirely under threat by these crazy liberals as well, right? That's the contradiction in his argument.
Well, let's see where he goes, because he has an interesting metaphor. Because as you know, all intellectuals, all roads come back to a movie movies that are made with a over $80 million budget.
Then you can have something like a liberal individualism.
So it's basically, as long as the conservatives are holding the door from the barbarian, then the liberals can be liberal.
Exactly that.
And that's how a functional society should work, in essence.
Well, in the story of the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, so the Shire is full of, well, let's call them liberals.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they're
smoking some stuff.
Yeah, they're hobbits, and they're all pursuing their own thing.
Pause it for 1 second. I say the movie because I will tell you something. I will bet everything I own that David Rubin never read a single one of those books. That everything he knows about the Hobbit is from the movie.
I'd be surprised if JP has, frankly. Yep. I think he's a big charlatan in terms of literacy, too.
I mean, the idea that now they're still using pot smoking as some substitute for liberalism. I mean, guys, we see you on the Joe Rogan Experience. Can you quit with this facade at this point? Why are they? What? Because they're hippies? I mean, sort of, right?
All the people in Middle Earth are on tea.
He wants to make a point about natural collectives. So let's talk about the book The Hobbit, which came out, in the early 20th century?
And what are hobbits? They're farmers, folks.
I'm curious about the what's happening in the Shire.
Smoking some stuff.
Yeah, they're hobbits, and they're all pursuing their own thing, and they think their little kingdom is everything. But, the borders are protected by the Striders. Aragorn is one of them, and it turns out that he's the descendant of ancient kings. And that's exactly right. It's like, as long as the perimeters are defended by the descendants of ancient kings, then there can be freedom inside the walls. And so, I've been criticized, the more public books I've written have been criticized for, what would you say, making a case out of the self-evident. But we are at a point where the self-evident is no longer self-evident and needs to be explained and defended. And that's actually, what would you say, that's what's turned me into a conservative, to the degree that I am a conservative. It's like, well, all these things that are self-evident have to be restated and also explained.
Right. You wouldn't have had to have written 12 rules for life had the system been operating properly.
Right.
That's the point. You would think.
If it is self-evident, why do you have to write books about it? You stupid idiots! Right? If it's self-evident,
here's the thing. He's trying to substitute. Self-evident is really about some type of right-wing moral code that he thinks, again, is like natural law or God's law, but he can't say that because then it gives away the game. So he pretends it's self-evident, even though it self-evidently is not self-evident, because if it were, you would not need to even discuss it or hold
make
the
a
doors.
case
Or
for
you could
the self-evident.
Maybe reference the real world instead of the Striders that go around.
I need to use nice try, Matt.
So I really like the Majority Report. I love The Hobbit, and I despise Jordan Peterson. But, they can get a little bit heady, but I want to know what you think about this. To me, it's just, it's another example of right-wing baloney where they basically contradict themselves and, use circular logic to justify their positions. But let me know in the comments, what do you think? Do you like Sam Seder? Do you like the Majority Report? Are you a Jordan Peterson fan? Or what do they get wrong about The Hobbit? All of this. I want to see it in the comments.